concern fundamentally is around the cloud seeding that has been reported in Dubai.
You pay a cheap price, you get what you pay for. I can produce a calculation for you and give it to you, and you may never know that it's wrong.
What is the biggest waster of energy in a UK home?
I'd probably say...
Why are the build costs so horrendous at the moment?
Because...
So Mike, tell me the two things that are on the horizon at the moment for the construction industry, but that no one's talking about, but that will cause us a major problem.
So...
HEM being the home energy model, and if I'm an architect, what three things would you say I need to either do or consider? What three pieces of advice would you give me as an architect?
So it's really important to read the consultations and understand what's being proposed. So I guess the three things that you need to bear in mind with HEM, and there's probably unfortunately more than three you need to consider, but
just give me
top
three.
So heat pumps are going to be crucial. So making sure that your design accommodates all of the locations, space requirements, tech. It's going to be some form of renewable technology. I say heat pump. That's the calculations based around that. Other technologies will work, but you're going to need to be able to accommodate space for that, and all of the ramifications that come with putting that renewable tech in the home. From a fabric perspective, every dwelling now needs to comply. So there's no more terrace houses that will be able to comply as a block. So everything's going to need to comply. So it's really important. G value, U value, psi value, the combination of that triangle is going to be really crucial to make sure you've got that balance. So you're not leaning too much on exaggerating expensive external walls or over insulating the floors and or putting in overly thermally efficient glazing and so forth. So you should balance that. And then I think the third thing really needs to be that the calculation takes account for things like shading on site. So if you're designing for a large builder or medium-sized builder, if you've got house type approval needs to be looked at, because if you've got the same house type on a site, it may be that it performs very differently now because the shading from other buildings is dealt with uniquely and in a different way in HEM than it was with SAP. And so you need to factor that in and be able to think through, how do we be efficient with our, like the timing? How do you enable Part L calculations to be done when you need the site plan to know what shading obstructions are close by, and how do you produce house type design that will comply across the country in different locations when the weather file's different, when the shading on particular sites will be very different. And so it's trying to keep that in the back of your mind, really. How can you take you can't design in isolation. Now you have to think about other aspects and how we adapt the process. So I think that's the three.
Cool. What about if I am a developer?
So I think those three still apply, but if we take them and put them to one side, they're architect specific.
Yep.
I think the tool at the moment is not complete. So everyone's really keen to try and find out whether their design, their approach kind of fits in to the model. So we need to bear in mind that the software that was released as part of the consultation isn't finalized, and so the output from the software is still, it's like a jigsaw puzzle with pieces missing. You can tell what the picture's going to be, but you don't know all the fine detail in terms of how it's going to work. I think it's really, really important to coordinate. You need now to coordinate internally and externally with different stakeholders. So there will be the sunsetting of all old regulatory sites. So any sites that are being built to 2010 regs, 2006 regs, they'll have an end when this regulation is released.
So when you say sunsetting, what you mean it's going to end?
That's it, it's finished. Everything will be brought forward, and the future home standard will be the standard, unless you fit under some transitional arrangements around the future home standard and the regs that we're in at the moment. You're going to need to adapt, adjust, bring forward, and make that work. So we're going to have, and design details going to need to change and adapt. So you've got architects, you're going to need M&E details a lot earlier, because HEM requires you to put in things like pipework lengths. It requires more detailed information around the thermal mass of your radiators and so forth, the radiator design. And so the timing of that information being available and the individuals that need to be involved, it's really important to kind of gather the team together to make sure that you're able to keep that design process moving forward in the right sequence. I think it's really important to communicate with internally so that everyone knows the type of heating system you're going to be putting in, that everyone's clear on the type of information that's going to be needed when you are handing a building over. You know, it's great that we're building these, or that the desire is to build net zero ready buildings. And so as the grid decarbonizes, we've got this net zero building stock that we're building. But if people don't live in them in the right way, then the emissions from the building will be enhanced and increased. And then our progress towards net zero for 2050 is not as progressed as we thought it might be. So it's really important to make sure that people can understand the building that they've got, that the handover process goes really well. They can understand how to operate it so it doesn't overheat, how they can use maybe some of the more complex heating or ventilation systems that they've got. It's really, really important to be able to understand that. So I think from a developer perspective, coordinating with all of the different internal and external stakeholders, really, really, really important, and making sure that you understand what's coming. So engage people early, find people that you trust, and work with them in a more collaborative way to find innovative solutions at the right time, so that and skills. It's really important to make sure that your supply chain's skilled, make sure that you've got the right products that you need, make sure that you've got people that are able to deliver the systems, commission the systems that are installed, or the building fabric systems that you're gonna use, that you can get the products that don't undermine changes.
Okay. Anything else on HEM that you think is worth knowing about? You mentioned that the consultation's on its way, that it's not out yet, so you didn't say this directly, but what I heard is don't panic. You've got time to figure stuff out. As you're figuring stuff out, one of the fundamental things that you've mentioned is about engaging with stakeholders, internal, external, meaning people that are involved in the project and those that aren't directly.
I mean, there's an eagerness always, isn't there, with anything that's coming new, to get ahead of the curve and insights, and you want to.
Yeah.
And so
you're talking here competitive advantage or disaster recovery. How do I prevent, or maybe disaster prevention? How do I?
You don't want to be shocked.
Yeah.
But you don't want to invest in something
Yeah.
that's actually going to cause you to.
So is there anything then, maybe my question needs to just adjust slightly and say, well, what should people be investing in now to prepare for home energy model?
So I put 5 action points. So one is start now. Start the process of being engaged with HEM.
What does that look like?
So don't bury your head in the sand. It's be familiar with the consultation. Stay connected online so that you can see this information come. There's loads of webinars. There's loads of information that's out there.
You're talking about stuff. People can keep an eye on your LinkedIn. Keep an eye on your.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you need to stay connected. I think we need to communicate early and educate early. So we need to be internally, we need to be sharing this amongst our stakeholders. So start now, communicate early, stay connected. I think in my brain, you've got compliance, computer says do it this way, and then you've got the ability to create beautiful buildings.
So creating a beautiful building is not linked to compliance. It's like one or the other.
Not so it's finding that ability so that you've not that compliance doesn't impinge on design flexibility. How can we create buildings which are wonderful to look at and wonderful to live in? There are other facets to a building, and you don't want to come so ingrained that you're designing a building that literally computer says yes to, but actually, you've got part F to think about. Is it a space that actually gives good air quality? Does it give good light? How do you balance part O with part F? How do you create a building now which enables a family to work at home, play at home? That's that sanctuary. How do you provide that? And it's not just that. Then as you look how it's connected with external spaces and landscapes and other kind of aspects of it. And then to me, it was literally figure out as a business, is part L a springboard or is it a target? Are we trying to hit compliance, or are we looking for that to be surpassed?
What's the answer to that question?
It's individual. It's really individual. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer.
Why not?
Because there's a benchmark set for us to comply with, and it's okay to comply with that benchmark. But there's also a benchmark that someone may have an aspiration to go beyond, and that should be celebrated. I my personal view is that you have to get the policy right to create a direction, and then there needs to be flexibility. Our world is filled with rich, diverse opinions and approaches to doing things, and so there needs to be a direction of travel. There needs to be a minimum benchmark, and then there needs to be a takeoff point from which people say, brilliant, I now know that this is a space that I have to go beyond. And then they set their target as to what they do. You've got Passive House that seeks to kind of drive beyond that. You've got Letty that are looking to set targets that go above and beyond that, and planners planning policies that are seeking to drive additional change. And so we should, there needs to be that baseline, but beyond that, we should be free to create. So those are kind of 5 things, I guess, that I had thought about.
And talk about the new regulations, where that is, what the difference is, the gossip.
Some of the challenges are around the fact that we just had the interim regulations had the validation cases for the interim set of regulations, which we're currently building against, didn't enable the software to be up and running in line with the launch of the regulations. And so the fear is that we're in the same situation again, that we're in a situation that the software tool, and now it's not just we're using SAP, but a different set of parameters. We're now using a completely new software tool that requires widespread collaboration between architect, developer, M&E, part O. You need information from part O to go into HEM, part L. So there's all of this, and the client doesn't really know what's coming. They continue to ask for buildings which are part L compliant and which deliver their EPCA. No, the EPC wrapper, the consultation has not even been released yet. The PCDB has not been designed yet. So the time frame of release end of this year, inception of next year, we are slightly behind the pace, I think.
So you talk about this HEM and then you talk about the wrapper. But what does it actually mean? What is a wrapper on a HEM?
So the software that we will have to use to comply with part hours, the home energy model, it's a centrally based piece of software, and it specifies certain parameters, has certain calculation methodologies built into it. The output from SAP, so you've got one tool that delivers the same output, and you just interpret the data in different ways.
And this is SAP, right?
Yeah. So with SAP, what we have got is one tool that uses a set of input parameters, which gives you an output parameter, and then we use that output in lots and lots of different ways. And so that isn't always efficient, it isn't always effective, it doesn't always yield data which is as useful. So with HEM, the idea is that you've got a central piece of software which is overlaid by wrappers. So if you want a calculation in relation to building regulations, the Future Home Standard, there's a wrapper which sits around, like a chocolate bar, just sits around the central software and interacts with it so that it knows the data entry points, the outputs from that software specific to a compliance report.
So is it a wrapper or is it a filter?
It's called a wrapper. That's what it's called. A Future Home Standard wrapper, an EPC wrapper. That's the technology that they use.
Okay. But is it, so what I mean by a wrapper, I was just thinking here from a practical sense, is a filter enables certain things to pass through and other things not, be that light or particles or whatever it is. Well, I guess particles, light, we'll get into that discussion later maybe. But a wrapper is something that keeps something bound in or seals something and protects something. So it seems like the way that you've described it, although it might be called a wrapper, it seems like it's more of a filter than it is a wrapper, as in some things are passing through other things, but at the end of it, you're getting the answer based on the filter that you've put on there.
Yeah, you could describe it as a filter. It lets certain things in and allows certain things out. I guess it goes around the wrapper can change. It's like a T-shirt. You put it on, you're the same.
Yeah.
But
It affects everything. So the home energy model in its entirety is affected by the wrapper of which it's called, or the filter, which name I've just given it, but it affects it in its entirety. So if my eye is the home energy model, depending on what filter I put over my eye will depend on what I can see. If I put ultraviolet filter on or an infrared filter on my eye, I'll be able to see things that I can't if I didn't have it on there. Is that an accurate description of what the relationship is between these wrappers and the home energy model?
Yeah, they allow the inputs and the outputs to be specific for the function that you're after.
Fine.
So, for instance, in SAP, you got the same output for Part L and EPC.
Yeah.
Whereas with the home energy model, you'll have a wrapper for compliance,
Right.
Future Home Standard, and a wrapper for the EPC. Different data input, different data output, different situations,
Great.
different requirements.
So I think that sounds like a great idea, to have something which has got all of the answers, but the answers that you're after will be dependent on the wrapper that you put over the front of it. I think that, or the filter of which you're viewing it.
Yeah, you'll be able to use the model in more accurate ways for different purposes.
Yeah,
That's what it
yeah.
enables it to do.
I think that's a good idea.
Instead of, I've got a square peg and the holes are very, very different,
Yeah.
so I have to hit it harder. It literally is, you can now change the way that model works to give you more specific outcomes that are related to the purpose with which you're trying to get data.
So that happens in SAP at the moment, right? SAP is this very raw, unforgiving methodology that doesn't work in every instance, few instances, and the way to make it work is to apply pressure in different ways for that peg that you described to fit. Where the HEM is, that's a different case. So I think that's a good way forward. Where I'm going, I think, with my question is, you mentioned of a delay and things aren't ready yet. When do you think they will be ready? And what do you think someone would need to do what do you think that someone would need to do to reduce the risk of change and be ready when it's ready?
So previous change in regulations, the interim regulations that we've had and we're operating under at the moment, the validation cases, the kind of signing off of those validation cases was slow to be completed, which had a knock-on effect to the completion of the software, then had a knock-on effect to the usability of the software. And so that was really challenging for the industry to get up to speed quickly and be able to draw conclusions from the software that would help, designs progress and business decisions to be made. And at the moment, we've not got a full issue of the home energy model. That's going to be released for the first time with the Future Home Standard. So the hope is that we won't be in that same situation, that validation cases, the ability to have the software be fit for purpose on release is going to be key. The challenge also here is that the user inputs within HEM very, very different. So as SAP has become more and more complex over the years with the introduction of things like psi values and the Y value and how that works, particularly that's an area where it can be difficult for sometimes to follow on and stay with the calculation methodology and pick the junctions and pick accurate heat loss values that go with those. So when we move into HEM, things like pipe lengths are needed for primary and secondary pipe work, thermal mass of radiators, and so specific help and information is going to be needed from other design team members, as well as potentially from Part O calculations. And the scheduling of those things could be really key. So my point there is that we go from that the ability to be a consultant is going to be a lot harder. You can calculate something, but there's a difference to then being able to consult to understand why the calculation methodology is yielding that result and then how to interact. I can drive a car, but I'd be no good as a taxi driver. And so it's really important that software is released in its end format as soon as it can be, so that people get a chance to play with that. So people get a chance to understand how it's different, how it functions, how it operates, the data entry points. So we're making sure that we're putting the window data in the right way around. We're making sure that we understand how to generate some of the inputs in the right way, because if the software is ready to go and it's released, that's fantastic. But if you've not got someone that can operate it and use it in the right way, then we still feel the impact within the industry around the delivery of calculations that are accurate. People are making business decisions based off of information that maybe hasn't been calculated as efficiently as possible, or maybe even accurately as it needs to be.
So this, what you've touched on there, is a potential risk then for organisations, that if they have got somebody that they are working with that is not competent, that they could actually have a major issue.
There will be a difference, I think, in the industry between people that can calculate and people that can consult, and the software is going to make that chasm bigger. And so it's just being clear on that. I think it's really important that the time is in place for everyone to catch up. We're all in this industry to give a good service and to support our customers and help our customers. And so there will be some training, some education, some uplift, some knowledge that is going to need to be gained by people to remain relevant in the industry. But yeah, clients, customers will need to be sure that those that they're calling on for support are educated, are au fait, they're compliant, they understand the software, not just where to put the data inputs, but they understand the methodology behind it, so that they can make informed decisions. Otherwise, build costs will be elevated beyond where they need to be unnecessarily, and we'd all rather invest money into making the building even more efficient than just being inefficient in trying to create a building which is just compliant.
Yeah, and I think that in terms of that investment, it's going to be time as well. I think one of the things that isn't discussed that often in the construction industry is the amount of time that's wasted going back over something or trying to fix something that didn't really need to be fixed in the first place. So I think that's a really good point that you've raised there.
Yeah, I mean, you touch on a good point around backwards and forwards and trying to get designs to work. If you can get it right at the beginning, fantastic. The benefit with SAP is that the results are calculated instantly. So at the moment, if there is a tweak, an adjustment that needs to be made, you click a button and you know if that combination of data inputs has yielded a compliant building. With HEM, at the moment, you need to click a button and refresh your screen over and over again to wait for 5, 6, 7 minutes until that one dwelling is compliant, or so not just compliant until it's yielded the results to tell you, obviously, if it's compliant with option 1 and option 2. So that will change once the software is issued out. But because it's dynamic, there's potential that the calculation time is going to be greatly enhanced. And if it is, that's going to take more time. It's going to cost more money. It also it elongates the design process because no longer, it's not as instantaneous to be able to yield those results.
So is that going to be impactful then for people that work for organisations that are major house builders that build hundreds, thousands of properties in a year, or is the impact going to be felt more on the smaller builders, 1, 2 properties a year?
I think it'll be different for different organisations. If you're a large house builder, you're probably up to speed with the proposed changes.
So you say that with a slight smile on your face. Is that definitely you're going to be up to speed, or you would assume that they would be up to speed?
Yeah, the house builders that I deal with, they're very well connected, they're very well informed, and so you'll be in a position where you'll know what's coming. The difficulty will be that at the moment you've not got a tool that enables you to make decisions now, and so the longer and longer that goes on, the greater the delay and the impact potentially on the supply chain. So the impact also for the large scale developer is you've got lots and lots of dwellings you're going to be building. So where there's an increased cost, it's amplified. And so if you're a small developer, you may be less informed, you're more involved in the actual delivery of your product. So you've got less kind of dedicated teams reviewing changes in regulations. And so you're having to be more nimble. And so you need to become informed so you can make that difference. But the costs to yourself are going to be maybe the increasing cost won't be as much because you're just not building at that volume and that scale. So I think for the large scale developer, they'll be informed. They'll know what's coming. They'll have dedicated departments to review these types of things. And so they'll be able to see the changes coming. The desire will be to have software that enables them to see how their house type designs function, work, progress, and so they'll be keen to do that. They'll also have to operate. My days. I want to go outside and just give people slippers. I bet Kevin's probably went out there.
How would you describe Part L, Part B, Part O of building regulations?
So Part L, that's the part of building regulations that we have had the most exposure with. So conservation of fuel and power, so to do with carbon, energy in buildings. Part O is a new kid on the block, this recent set of regulations. So that's been brought in particularly to mitigate overheating in residential buildings. There wasn't really a good provision to kind of make sure buildings didn't overheat in previous issues of Part L. So we've now got Part O, which is great. We have that kind of interplays with Part B, which is to do with fire. Part K, to do with protection from falling. Part F, ventilation in buildings. And so building regulations is built up with all these different aspects that a building needs to be compliant with for different reasons, and they all need to be met. There's challenge sometimes when they contradict each other. So I know particularly at the moment, Part O and Part K, around heights of windowsills to avoid the risk of falling. There's been some understanding there as to which one trumps which. But much like we've also got the opportunity to design our buildings, when anything takes centre stage over anything else, it can create problems. You know, you build a building which is designed to maximise daylight, where you've got a problem potentially with overheating. If you build a building which is designed to reduce carbon, yeah, it might not be a fabulous place to live. You know, if you design a building for functionality and usability, you know, you can't put one thing at the front to the detriment of others. We need holistic design. And the issue we've had for the last 24 months, last 2 years, is we've taken existing designs, house types, or designs that have been going through the planning process, and we've had to overlay new regulations on top of that, and that's been a challenge to try and adapt and adjust. But as we move forward, we really would benefit from a holistic design process. You know, that's what architects and other design team members are trying to create, is a building which incorporates a beautiful place to be. It's adaptable, so you can work there, you can live there. It doesn't require the heating to be on all of the time. It provides great fresh air. When it's hot outside, you know, you're able to remain cool. And so it really is a holistic approach, a multifaceted approach to building design.
Lots of people look for a silver bullet. If I just did this and it will solve that problem, and it would solve it in its entirety, and all I need to do is just focus on just doing this one thing. You touched on the appearance of, or the prospect of, the various different parts of building regulations seemingly being opposed to one another. The example that you gave is of overheating and windows and light. But my question with that framing as the background is, does it really, is there a silver bullet? Is there something that we can just do and it solves all the problems? One thing.
The answer is no. There isn't, is there? You've got different, your building should be designed for different people. It should be designed.
But should there be a silver bullet though? Should we go in pursuit of this? If we just did this and it would solve the problem?
But what problem? What problem are you trying to solve?
So the problem I'm trying to solve is I want to make sure that I've got a building that passes Part L. So thermally it's all tight and sealed up and nice. But then I also need to comply with Part O. So that means it can't be too hot, because that's going to be a problem. And then I also need to comply with the light. I've forgotten what the light is now off the top of my head. So I've got those three areas of building regulations, or three things that I want to achieve, and it feels like that they're all working against each other. So should I pursue, either as a consultancy, a silver bullet to solve all the problems, or should I look for, if I'm a customer, be that architect or client or whoever, a silver bullet to solve all those problems?
Yeah, there isn't a silver bullet to compliance. We've got compliance metrics. So we've got our TER, we've got our TFE, and we've got our TPER.
So what is that? What's TER, TFE, and TPER?
So we've got our emissions requirements to do with carbon. We've got our energy requirements to do with kind of how much energy the fixed building services will particularly consume, and then how the fabric performs. And they require different thought processes and different selections within the building design to make that work. And that's just to comply with Part L. And then, you know, your building control officer is interested in a variety of other aspects of building regulations to meet other requirements and other criteria. And so there isn't a single, you get the fabric right, put the fabric first, and then you've got to get an efficient heating system. That's probably that's probably as simplified as you can make it.
The rest of it is open to interpretation, different on different buildings, apart from those principles.
Your fabric needs to be balanced. Like you've got your U value, your G value, and your psi value.
Yeah.
It's in those three. It's going to help with your fabric. But as you do that, you mentioned lighting. You need to make sure that we've got naturally lit dwellings. They need to be spacious. They need to be adaptable, both for a growing family or for other kind of aspects to reach different types of the population, disability and so forth. So there are lots and lots of facets that our buildings are trying to incorporate, and it's being able to put them all on the table and design something in such a way where they all feed into and they all work together. So I don't think there's a single solution that will deliver appropriate, compliant buildings every time. There's lots of different reasons for building a building, and they need to be taken into account.
So is the guiding principle here balance? There needs to be balance between those elements of the building compliance.
Yeah. If one aspect of building design takes precedence and others suffer at the expense of others, then that is gonna cause you an issue.
So in a straight answer then, do these areas conflict with one another?
In places, there are places where they do conflict, but they're not designed to conflict. They're designed to meet different requirements. So potentially Part O might be adapted, or Part K might be clarified, for instance. But so we've got frequently asked questions on underneath the Part O guidance, so that we can understand what it means by certain terms, or when it conflicts with certain aspects of the simplified methodology, or where it clashes with Part K. So in trying to answer how to resolve that and to make sure that everyone is moving forward in the best way.